I built an empire while they looked down on me.
I met my wife Rachel during my final year of graduate school, where I was finishing my master's in fluid engineering. Money was tight, so I was doing plumbing work on the side, installing water heaters, fixing leaks, unclogging drains. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills while I worked on my thesis about predictive infrastructure diagnostics. I wasn't ashamed of the work, actually enjoyed the problem-solving aspect and the tangible satisfaction of fixing something broken. Rachel was a second-year associate at Morrison & Associates, one of those white-shoe law firms where everyone looks like they stepped out of a magazine. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had this fire in her eyes when she talked about making partners someday. We met at a coffee shop near campus where I was working part-time. She noticed me reading engineering textbooks between customers and struck up a conversation. Those early days were incredible. She was genuinely curious about my work, asking detailed questions about my research into AI-powered pipeline diagnostics. I was fascinated by her legal mind and her drive to succeed. We'd meet for quick dinners between my shifts and her brutal associate hours, talking about our dreams and the future we wanted to build together. She'd trace her finger along my jawline and say, "You're going places, David. We'll be unstoppable together." But somewhere along the way, that narrative started shifting. I can't pinpoint exactly when, but I remember the first time she introduced me at a Morrison & Associates holiday party as David, he's a plumber. The way she said it like it was a cute anecdote that showed how down-to-earth and non-shallow she was. Like she deserved extra credit for loving someone who worked with his hands. I smiled and played along because I thought it was temporary. I was deep into developing what would become Aquatech Solutions, a revolutionary system that uses artificial intelligence and predictive analytics to identify weaknesses in municipal pipeline systems before they become catastrophic failures. Most cities were hemorrhaging money fixing problems after they'd already caused millions in damage. I saw an opportunity to change that completely. My first real breakthrough came during late nights at the university library, sketching algorithms and building prototypes. I developed a diagnostic tool that could predict up to 85% of urban pipe failures before they happened. It wasn't glamorous work, but the potential impact was enormous. A small water district in Pennsylvania became my first client, and the results were immediate. We helped them prevent 3 major failures that would have cost them over $2 million. By the time Rachel started her third year at Morrison, I had quietly assembled a small team of brilliant engineers and coders who believed in the vision. We operated out of a tiny office with flickering fluorescent lights and a shared bathroom, but we were building something revolutionary. Our AI models were getting more sophisticated, our client base was growing through word of mouth, and we were starting to save cities serious money. But every time I tried to share this excitement with Rachel, she'd glaze over. Her eyes would drift to her phone, to emails from partners and messages from clients. She was too busy climbing her own ladder to notice I was building one too. Gradually, I stopped trying to explain the technical details or the growing success. It was easier to let her believe I was just the guy who fixed pipes. The family dinners at her parents' house became a monthly torture session. Her father, Marcus, was a former state senator who'd transitioned into corporate consulting. He had that politician's way of talking at you instead of to you, especially if he thought you were beneath his notice. He'd hold court about the stock market and the political climate while treating me like part of the furniture. "So, David," he'd say with this patronizing smile, "still crawling under sinks for a living?" Her mother, Patricia, was more subtle but equally dismissive. She'd ask about my day in a tone that suggested she already knew the answer would be boring. She had this way of looking through me, like I was a temporary inconvenience that would eventually be upgraded. "How nice that you have such simple work," she'd say. "No stress, no real responsibility." Rachel's younger sister, Jennifer, was the worst of all. She was one of those Instagram influencer types with 1 million followers and 0 actual accomplishments. She'd spend entire dinners scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing Rachel something that would make them both laugh, never bothering to include me in whatever they found amusing. When she did acknowledge my existence, it was with the kind of performative kindness you'd show to a service worker. Rachel would pat my knee under the table during these dinners, a gesture I initially thought was supportive, but gradually realized was more like a warning. Don't ruin the image. Don't step out of your assigned role. Don't complicate the story they'd all agreed I was part of. Meanwhile, Aquatech was exploding in ways I'd never imagined. We landed our first major municipal contract with Philadelphia's water department. Our system identified weak points in their aging infrastructure and helped them prioritize repairs based on actual data rather than guesswork. In 6 months, we saved the city over $12 million in prevented failures and reduced water loss. The success rate was unprecedented. Our AI was correctly predicting 87% of potential failures. Word spread quickly through the infrastructure community. Other cities started calling: Boston, Atlanta, Chicago. Everyone wanted to pilot our system. We expanded our team, moved to a larger facility, and started winning industry awards. I was invited to speak at conferences, consulted on federal infrastructure policy, and featured in trade publications. But I kept my public profile minimal, letting our CTO handle most of the press, while I focused on the technology and business development. The irony was delicious. While Rachel's family treated me like the help at their dinner parties, I was negotiating 7-figure contracts with major metropolitan areas. While Marcus lectured me about getting serious about my career, I was signing deals with the Department of Water Management for a national pilot program. While Patricia asked about my little jobs, I was building a company that employed dozens of brilliant people and was revolutionizing how cities managed their infrastructure. I started viewing those family dinners as a fascinating social experiment. How would people treat someone they perceived as having no power or influence? The answer was exactly as badly as you'd expect. They'd interrupt me mid-sentence, dismiss my opinions on any topic more complex than sports or weather, and make jokes at my expense that I was expected to laugh along with. Rachel began referring to me as utility class in front of her colleagues. The first time she said it was at a rooftop cocktail party for Morrison Partners. "This is my husband, David," she told some senior associate. "He's utility class, keeps things running." The guy smirked and barely shook my hand. I went home that night and signed a contract worth $3 million with Detroit's Water Authority. But Rachel never asked how my day went. The utility class thing became her favorite description. She'd text me things like, "Can you pick up my dry cleaning? Utility class hero." Like I was her personal assistant, rather than her husband. When I'd try to share something about work, a major contract signing, a breakthrough in our AI modeling, a city official thanking us for preventing a disaster, she'd nod absently and change the subject to her cases or office politics. The breaking point came when she excluded me from Morrison's annual retreat in Aspen. We'd been planning to go together for months. I'd rearranged major investor meetings and postponed conference calls to make the weekend work. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, she looked at me over dinner and said, "I've been thinking, and I don't think you'd really fit in there, David. It's all lawyers and their spouses, white shoe crowd. You'd be bored out of your mind." She said it with that glossy smile that meant the decision was already final, and she was just giving me the courtesy of an explanation. I wanted to ask if she'd ever been bored at the infrastructure conferences where I'd given keynote speeches, or the investor dinners where I'd pitched our technology to venture capitalists. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Sure, enjoy yourself." Because I'd learned that in Rachel's world, I wasn't a partner. I was an accessory, and accessories didn't get invited to the important events. That weekend, while she was networking and schmoozing in Aspen, I finalized the biggest deal in Aquatech's history, a comprehensive contract with the federal government to implement our diagnostic system in over 100 cities nationwide. It was the kind of agreement that would put us on the map as the industry leader and generate revenue streams that dwarfed anything Rachel's law firm had ever seen. But when she came back, glowing with stories about the retreat and all the important people she'd met, she never asked how my weekend had gone. She was too busy describing the partner dinners and the networking opportunities to notice that her utility-class husband had just signed a deal that would change the trajectory of urban infrastructure management across the country. I started keeping more and more to myself, not out of spite, but out of genuine curiosity about how long this could continue. How successful could I become while still being treated like the hired help at family gatherings? How many millions could Aquatech be worth before someone thought to ask what exactly I did all day? The company continued its meteoric rise. We opened offices in 6 cities, hired top talent from major tech firms, and developed new AI models that could predict not just pipe failures, but optimal maintenance schedules, budget allocation priorities, and long-term infrastructure planning. Major consulting firms started trying to poach our engineers. Investment banks began circling with acquisition offers that made my head spin. Rachel's career was thriving too, and I was genuinely proud of her. She was brilliant at what she did, worked incredibly hard, and deserved every promotion she earned. But somewhere along the way, our marriage had become two parallel lives that occasionally intersected at dinner or social events. She'd talk about her cases and office politics while I nodded and asked appropriate questions. I'd mention something vague about work, and she'd make a supportive noise before moving on to something more interesting. The disconnect became almost surreal. I'd spend my days in meetings with city planners and federal officials, making decisions that affected millions of people's daily lives, then come home to be asked if I could fix a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I'd negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts in the morning and get lectured by Marcus about real careers at Sunday dinner. One particularly memorable evening, Rachel's entire family was discussing vacation homes and investment portfolios while I sat quietly eating my dinner. Marcus turned to me with that patronizing smile and said, "So David, when are you going to get serious about building some real wealth? Rachel's carrying a heavy load here, and a man should contribute more than just basic household maintenance." Rachel laughed lightly, not defending me, just amused by her father's directness. "Dad, David likes what he does. He's simple that way." She said it like I was a golden retriever who'd chosen to keep fetching the same stick. The smile froze on my face as I realized that in their minds, and maybe in Rachel's too, I wasn't building anything at all. I was just a warm body taking up space at their table. That night, I went home and reviewed the latest valuation report from our financial advisors. Aquatech Solutions was approaching unicorn status, a billion-dollar valuation based on our technology, contracts, and growth trajectory. We were being courted by major infrastructure firms for potential acquisitions. Investment bankers were calling daily with offers that would set me up for life. But I didn't share any of this with Rachel. I was too fascinated by the social experiment unfolding in my own life. What would happen when the truth finally came out? How would they react when the utility-class husband turned out to be worth more than all their law degrees and political connections combined? I didn't have to wait much longer to find out. Last Wednesday, my CFO forwarded an email marked urgent. A Wall Street Journal reporter had been investigating the infrastructure technology sector and had stumbled onto Aquatech's remarkable growth story. She'd connected our government contracts with our client testimonials and financial projections. The piece was scheduled to run Thursday morning with the headline, "The Hidden Billion-Dollar Company Revolutionizing American Infrastructure." I stared at the email for a long time, knowing that everything was about to change. For years, I'd operated in the shadows, letting Rachel and her family believe whatever story made them comfortable. Now the floodlights were about to hit, and there was no hiding anymore. Thursday morning came, and the article exploded across every business publication and financial website. Aquatech Solutions, the plumber who built a tech empire. From pipes to predictions, how one man quietly revolutionized urban infrastructure. The billion-dollar company you've never heard of. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. and didn't stop. Investment firms, reporters, potential clients, headhunters. Everyone wanted to talk to the mysterious founder who'd built a unicorn company while flying completely under the radar. My assistant had to start screening calls because the volume was overwhelming. But I didn't call Rachel. I didn't give her a heads up or prepare her for what was coming. She'd spent years not asking about my work, not caring about my actual accomplishments. She could read about them in the Wall Street Journal, like everyone else. That weekend was Rachel's big celebration dinner. She'd just made senior partner at Morrison, the youngest in the firm's history, and wanted to share the moment with her family. She'd picked one of those trendy downtown restaurants where the wine list cost more than most people's monthly rent, and every table had a view of the city skyline. Her skyline, as she liked to think of it. I arrived slightly late to the celebration dinner, having spent the afternoon in an emergency board meeting about our suddenly very public profile and the flood of acquisition inquiries that had started pouring in. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Rachel loved. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs, with a wine list that read like a geography textbook, and prices that made you grateful for expense accounts. Every table had a perfect view of the downtown skyline, which Rachel always referred to as her skyline, as if making senior partner had given her personal ownership of the city's architectural achievements. Rachel was already holding court when I walked in, her parents and sister hanging on every word as she described her path to partnership and the obstacles she'd overcome. She looked absolutely radiant in the candlelight, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, every inch the successful attorney she'd worked so hard to become. This was her moment, her victory lap, and she was clearly savoring every second of it. The conversation flowed around me in predictable patterns. Marcus dominated the discussion with his usual mixture of political commentary and business advice, speaking with the kind of practiced authority that only comes from years of public speaking. He'd gesture with his wine glass for emphasis while explaining complex economic theories, occasionally pausing to make sure everyone was properly impressed by his insights. Patricia sat beside him like the perfect political wife she'd once been, nodding at appropriate moments and adding supportive commentary about Rachel's achievements. She had this way of making everything sound like it was happening to her personally. We're so proud. We always knew Rachel would succeed. We've watched her work so hard for this moment. As if she'd been putting in 18-hour days at the law firm instead of spending her afternoons at the country club. Jennifer was documenting everything for her social media empire, taking carefully posed photos of the wine glasses and appetizers, capturing candid shots of Rachel mid-laugh, probably already composing captions about family success and girl power. She'd perfected the art of being simultaneously present and absent, participating in the conversation while managing her online brand. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Rachel said during a brief lull, raising her champagne glass with both hands like she was accepting an Oscar. "Making senior partner has been my dream since law school, and having my family here to celebrate means absolutely everything to me." She paused for effect, her eyes glistening with what looked like genuine emotion. "Even my sweet, simple husband who keeps me grounded and reminds me what really matters in life." She gestured toward me with that indulgent smile I knew so well, the one that said she found my lack of ambition both charming and slightly pathetic. "David might just be a plumber, but he's my plumber, and I wouldn't have it any other way." Everyone laughed on cue. Even Jennifer, who'd spent most of the evening staring at her phone, looked up long enough to giggle at her sister's performance of humble gratitude. I forced a smile and clinked my glass against Rachel's, tasting the expensive champagne and thinking about the acquisition offer that had come in that afternoon. A tech giant wanting to buy Aquatech for more money than everyone at this table would see in their combined lifetimes. Marcus launched into his usual dinner speech about Rachel's achievements and how proud they all were to have such a successful daughter. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, overcome with emotion at her daughter's triumph. Jennifer snapped photos for what I assumed would become another Instagram story about family pride and power couples. Then Patricia's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced at it casually, probably expecting some political gossip or celebrity drama. Instead, her face went completely white. Her wine glass trembled in her hand as she read the headline. "Rachel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why does the Wall Street Journal say your husband's company is valued at over $1 billion?" The restaurant didn't actually go silent. There were still other conversations happening. Silverware clinking, servers moving between tables. But our little corner of the world might as well have been vacuum sealed. Every face turned toward me with identical expressions of shock and confusion. Rachel's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Marcus's face had gone the color of concrete. Jennifer's phone was still recording, though she seemed to have forgotten she was holding it. "David?" Rachel managed to say, her voice cracking. "What is she talking about?" I leaned back in my chair, feeling years of quiet patience finally reaching their conclusion. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, tucked away like a secret I'd carried in the pocket of my work jeans for so long I'd almost forgotten its weight. "Aquatech Solutions is mine," I said simply. "I built it. The billion-dollar valuation, the government contracts, the revolutionary AI technology that's changing how cities manage their infrastructure, all mine." Patricia thrust her phone across the table. The article was right there in bold black letters. Aquatech Solutions, from basement startup to billion-dollar infrastructure giant. My name wasn't in the headline, but it was throughout the article, along with quotes from city officials and detailed descriptions of our technology's impact. I met Rachel's stare, watching her try to process information that didn't fit the story she'd been telling herself for years. "But, David," she whispered, you fix pipes." I nodded once, letting her words hang in the air. "That's right, I fix pipes. I also built a company that prevents billions of dollars in infrastructure failures every year. Turns out you can do both." The silence stretched until Marcus finally found his voice. "This is impossible," he said, though he was staring at the phone screen like it might change if he looked hard enough. "You never said anything. You never mentioned. You never asked." I interrupted gently. In 8 years of family dinners, not one of you ever asked what I actually did. You just assumed you knew, because it fit your narrative better. Jennifer was the first to really grasp what had happened. She looked down at her phone, then back at me, her eyes wide. So when we were joking about when we called you, she couldn't finish the sentence. When you called me the help, when your mother asked about my little jobs, when your father lectured me about getting serious about my career, I smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in it. Yeah, I remember all of that. Rachel set down her glass with shaking hands. David, why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to be partners. We share everything. The word partners almost made me laugh. Rachel, you called me utility class to your colleagues. You left me off the invitation to your firm retreat because I wouldn't fit in. You haven't asked me a single meaningful question about my work in 3 years. Her face crumpled as the timeline clicked into place. All those late nights I'd spent at the office, all those business trips I'd taken, all those times I'd come home excited about a breakthrough or a major deal, only to have her change the subject to something from her world. I thought you were happy, she whispered. I thought you liked keeping things simple. I was happy, I said. I was happy building something meaningful while you built your career. But I wasn't happy being treated like I was less than you, like I was lucky to be at your table. Marcus had recovered enough to go into damage control mode. Well, David, this is wonderful news. Now that we understand the full picture, perhaps we can discuss some opportunities. There's so much potential for collaboration. I held up a hand to stop him. Marcus, I don't need your opportunities. I don't need your connections or your political insights or your investment advice. I built this without any of you because none of you thought I was capable of building anything worth your attention. Patricia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. David, we didn't know. If we had known, if you had known, you would have treated me differently, I finished. That's exactly the point. You only respect success you can see and understand, but some of us are building things that matter more than corner offices and partnership tracks. Rachel reached for my hand across the table. David, please, we can work this out. This doesn't have to change anything between us. I pulled my hand away gently. Rachel, this changes everything because now you can't pretend you don't know who I really am. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The restaurant around us continued its elegant dinner service, completely unaware of the small earthquake happening in our corner booth. I want you all to know that I don't hate you, I said, looking around the table. I'm not angry, and this wasn't some elaborate revenge plot. I just got tired of being the person you needed me to be instead of the person I actually am. Jennifer was openly staring now, her phone forgotten. So you really built all that? The $1 billion in the government contracts? I nodded. Every bit of it. While you were all discussing my simple little job, I was revolutionizing how cities manage their water systems. While you were making jokes about plumbers, I was preventing disasters and saving taxpayers millions of dollars. Rachel's voice was barely audible. David, what happens now? I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She was still beautiful, still brilliant, still everything that had attracted me to her initially. But she was also still the woman who'd been embarrassed by her husband's work clothes, who'd excluded him from important events, who'd reduced him to a punchline at dinner parties. Now you know, I said simply, and I don't have to pretend anymore. I walked out of the restaurant that night and didn't look back. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car. Rachel trying to call, her parents sending frantic texts, even Jennifer messaging me for the first time in years. But I didn't answer any of them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media attention, investor meetings, and acquisition discussions. Aquatech's profile exploded overnight. We were featured in major business publications, invited to infrastructure conferences, and courted by tech giants wanting to integrate our AI systems into their platforms. Rachel tried everything to salvage our marriage. She showed up at my office with apologies and explanations. She sent long emails about how she'd just been caught up in her own success and hadn't meant to diminish mine. She talked about how we could be a power couple, how my success validated her judgment in marrying me, how we could leverage both our achievements for maximum impact. But that was the problem. She still saw my life's work as something to be leveraged for her benefit. She was sorry she'd been caught, not sorry for the years of casual dismissal and condescension. She wanted to rewrite our story now that she knew the ending. but I couldn't forget all the chapters where she treated me like a supporting character in her biography. I filed for separation 6 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month, and it was surprisingly amicable. Rachel got to keep her narrative of being the youngest senior partner in Morrison's history. I got to keep the company I'd built and the self-respect I'd reclaimed. Aquatech just completed a strategic merger with a major infrastructure consulting firm. Our combined valuation is approaching $2 billion. We're implementing our diagnostic systems in over 200 cities nationwide and expanding internationally. I still keep my original toolbox in my office and still do hands-on plumbing work occasionally because that's part of who I am and I'm not changing for anyone anymore. The family has made various attempts to reconnect now that they understand what they'd overlooked. Marcus sends articles about infrastructure policy with notes about collaboration opportunities. Patricia mails birthday cards with long messages about family bonds and misunderstandings. Jennifer actually follows Aquatech's social media accounts and likes our posts, probably hoping for some reflected glory. But it's too late for all that. They had 8 years to see me as I actually was, and they chose to see me as they needed me to be for their own comfort. That kind of willful blindness doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. Sometimes people ask if I regret keeping the secret for so long, if I should have spoken up sooner or demanded more respect. But I don't think so. I learned valuable lessons about who people really are when they think you have nothing to offer them. I learned that respect given only after success is revealed isn't real respect at all. Most importantly, I learned that I don't need anyone else's validation to know my own worth. I built something meaningful with my own hands and my own mind. I solved problems that mattered and helped cities function better for millions of people. That's worth more than all the partnership dinners and country club memberships in the world. Rachel's doing fine, by the way. She's dating a federal judge now, someone who fits better into her world of prestigious careers and social status. I genuinely hope she's happy. We just weren't right for each other once she decided I needed to be smaller so she could feel bigger. As for me, I'm building the next generation of infrastructure technology and loving every minute of it. My team respects the work we do together. My clients value the solutions we provide, and I never have to smile politely while someone calls me utility class ever again. Sometimes the best revenge is just being yourself and letting other people realize how wrong they were about you. Turns out the plumber was the one who built an empire while everyone else was polishing their image. Not bad for someone who was just fixing pipes, right?